Welcome, dear listeners, to another captivating mystery waiting to unfold. You are about to hear Murder at Seacliff Bay. A gripping Inspector Price tale of stolen jewels, hidden secrets, and murder by the sea. Be sure to subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss the next thrilling case. And now, let us begin. Chapter 1. Seen a holiday by the sea. The train hissed into Seacliff Station. Inspector Harold Price stepped onto the platform, suitcase in hand, and paused. The air was sharp and brisk, smelling of salt and seaweed. It had been years since he'd taken a proper holiday. This one had been forced on him by his superintendent, who declared he looked as gray as the station walls. Seacliff Bay was meant to cure that. A quiet resort on England's southern coast, promising cliffs, sea views, and most important, distance from London. Price intended to walk, read, and think of nothing more complicated than the tides. A hired motor carried him along the promenade, where the bay curved like a crescent lined with whitewashed villas, bathing huts, and a long pier jutting into the water. At the far end rose the Seacliffe Grand Hotel, cream-colored and imposing on its cliff. It looked like a place built for people who wanted to forget the world for a while. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of polish and roses. The manager, a thin man named Dalrymple with a clipped mustache and weary smile, welcomed him. "Mr. Price, 7 nights, sea view." "We're honored," Dalrymple said, passing him the register. "Breakfast until 11, tea at 4, and tonight is our moonlit gala on the terrace." "Noted," Price said, signing simply as Harold Price. No mention of Inspector. On holiday, he preferred to be no one of consequence. As he turned from the desk, a woman swept in, tall, elegant, with dark eyes and an ivory traveling coat. A bellboy staggered behind her under a stack of hat boxes. "Lady Beatrice Hargreaves," Dalrymple murmured. Price had read that name before, a wealthy widow known for her art collection and for owning a diamond pendant valued at a small fortune. Even now, a glimmer showed at her throat beneath her silk scarf. 2 more guests followed soon after. The first was a slim man in a cream suit with a well-trimmed beard and an air of practiced charm. He spoke in smooth, French-accented English to Dalrymple. "Lucien Moreau," he introduced himself, an art dealer by reputation. Then came a young woman juggling a typewriter case and notebooks. She nearly tripped on the carpet, caught herself, and grinned as if used to mishaps. "Clara Whitfield," Dalrymple said brightly. "A writer." The last notable arrival was a heavy, set man with a bulldog jaw and a walking stick. "Marsh. Edwin Marsh," he barked, skipping pleasantries. A London banker, Price guessed, by the stiff collar and general air of irritation. Price observed them automatically. Habit, not intent. People often revealed themselves in how they entered rooms. These 4 had all made an impression. Price's suite on the 2nd floor was simple and comfortable. From the balcony he could see the curve of the bay and the sweep of the promenade below. For the first time in months, his shoulders eased. By late afternoon he was on the terrace with tea. The other guests soon appeared, scattered among the tables. Lady Beatrice sat alone beneath an awning, reading the Times. When she moved, the silk at her throat shifted, and for a moment the famous diamond caught the sun in a sharp flash. Lucien Moreau arrived not long after, drawing smiles from the staff with his easy French charm. He lingered by the terrace rail, his eyes occasionally flicking toward Lady Beatrice's table. Clara Whitfield brought her typewriter and began hammering at the keys between bites of a scone, her brow furrowed. Every so often she glanced toward Beatrice, then at her paper. Edwin Marsh came last, demanding whiskey to fortify his tea and muttering about the price of shipping shares. His walking stick struck the stone with each step. They were an odd group, Price thought. The sort luxury hotels tended to gather wealth ambition, vanity. He reminded himself none of it was his concern. This was meant to be a holiday. As Price finished his tea, a shadow fell across his table. Clara Whitfield stood there clutching a notebook. "Pardon me," she said. "You're a detective, aren't you?" Price blinked. "No," he said automatically. She smiled. "You are. The shoes gave you away, practical but not dull, and the way you watch exits. And you didn't flinch when Marsh barked at the waiter." "Detectives never flinch." "Perhaps I'm a chemist," Price said. "Chemists don't sit like they're waiting for someone to lie," she said cheerfully, sitting without asking. "I write detective novels." "Well, I attempt to. I like to study real ones." "I'm not here to be studied." "Neither am I," she said. "But here we are." She tapped her notebook with her pencil. "If someone dies this week, you'll let me watch you solve it, won't you?" "I hope no one does," Price said dryly. "Oh, so do I," she grinned, then rose. "But if they do, I call first interview." She returned to her typewriter, already smiling at her own joke. Price allowed himself the faintest smile too, then looked out over the water again. The sea had turned the color of tarnished silver as the sun dropped. Dinner was served in the oak-paneled restaurant, windows open to the evening air. A small quartet played waltzes from the gallery. Price dined alone, content to listen and observe without joining conversations. Lucien Morrow entertained two local solicitors with easy anecdotes, laughter rising from their table. Clara Whitfield scribbled between courses, her soup forgotten beside her. Edwin Marsh ate with the intensity of a man trying to win an argument with his steak. And Lady Beatrice dined alone, unhurried. The diamond pendant now openly visible. Even from across the room, it drew the candlelight like ice catching fire. They barely acknowledged one another, yet Price sensed a subtle tension, as though unseen wires ran between them. Perhaps it was only the detective in him refusing to rest. Still, it caught his attention. He finished his coffee and left the dining room, choosing the long way to his suite. On the second floor landing, he passed a storeroom marked "Manager's Private." Beside it sat a crate stamped with foreign labels and tagged for Mr. Morrow. Art, Price thought, expensive and fragile, like the people who bought it. Back in his suite, Price stood on the balcony listening to the soft crash of waves below. From here the hotel glowed warm against the darkening cliff. Lauder drifted faintly from the terrace as staff strung lanterns for the gala. He told himself firmly that this week would hold no puzzles, no riddles, no missing things, no corpses, just sea air and silence. Yet as he watched the lights flicker along the terrace, he thought again of the diamond at Lady Beatrice's throat and the sharp, assessing glance Lucien Morrow had given it. He pushed the thought away and went inside. Tomorrow, he decided, he would do nothing more complicated than walk the beach. Chapter 2c. The moonlit gala, the Seacliffe Grand's terrace had been transformed. Lanterns hung from the balustrades, swaying gently in the sea breeze. A band played in the pavilion as guests drifted in pairs and clusters, glasses in hand, their voices rising and falling against the rhythm of the music. Inspector Harold Price stood near a stone column, hands in his pockets, watching the evening unfold. He had dressed simply in a black dinner suit and dark tie. He felt oddly like a ghost among these brightly polished people, which suited him perfectly. It was meant to be an evening of spectacle. The Seacliffe Grand's annual moonlit gala was the social high point of the season. Music, dancing, champagne fireworks launched from the lower rocks. Dalrymple had been fluttering about the hotel all day like a man preparing to host royalty. Price had come simply to watch. He had no wish to dance. Observation was second nature, and tonight it passed for entertainment. Lucien Morrow arrived first among the notable guests, wearing a white flower in his buttonhole and a confidence that seemed to open space for him wherever he stood. He moved through the crowd, greeting strangers as if they were old friends. The staff adored him. Price could see it in the way they leaned in when he spoke, smiling at his faintly accented jokes. Clara Whitfield appeared next, wrapped in a dark shawl over a pale dress that didn't quite fit, though she carried it with irreverent charm. She scanned the terrace quickly, as though noting the layout of a stage, before slipping to a corner with a glass of punch and a small notebook. Price noticed she had ink on the back of her hand. She'd been writing until the last moment. Edwin Marsh lumbered in shortly after, his walking stick striking the stone. He wore formal evening clothes, as if they were armor, and looked immediately displeased by everything. The music too loud, the champagne too frivolous, the air too salty. He planted himself at the terrace edge, glowering at the fireworks crew setting up on the rocks below. And then Lady Beatrice Hargreaves arrived. A hush spread along the terrace like a ripple. She wore a gown the color of pale steel, her dark hair swept back, and at her throat the diamond pendant displayed openly now on its fine platinum chain. It was not large, but it blazed with an almost surgical brilliance. Even from several paces away, Price saw eyes swing to it like compass needles. Lady Beatrice carried herself as if unaware of the effect, though Price doubted she missed anything. She crossed the terrace without haste, exchanged a few murmured greetings, and took a seat near the balustrade. Lucien Morrow's gaze followed her. Clara glanced up from her notebook and frowned, though whether at Beatrice or at her own page, Price couldn't tell. Marsh stared outright, then scowled and looked away sharply, as though embarrassed to have been caught admiring anything. The band struck up a livelier tune. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. The terrace filled with motion and color, yet Price's attention kept circling back to those four figures who seemed not to belong to the crowd so much as orbit it. Lucien drifted toward Beatrice, glass in hand. He bowed lightly. "Lady Beatrice," he said in smooth French-inflected English, "you bring light to an already illuminated evening." "Flattery's wasted on me, Mr. Morrow," she replied evenly, though the corner of her mouth hinted at amusement. "Do you ever tire of charming rooms?" "Only empty ones," he said. "This one is mercifully full." Price caught no warmth in her tone, yet she didn't dismiss him either. Morrow stayed, smiling, spinning idle talk about Paris auctions and Venetian miniatures. Beatrice listened with the cool patience of someone accustomed to performance. A few yards away, Clara scribbled furiously in her notebook while pretending not to watch them. When a waiter passed, she took another glass of punch and muttered something about character dynamics. Marsh, meanwhile, stood immovable near the rail, drinking his champagne with grim duty, his heavy brow lowered as he watched Beatrice and Morrow speak. Once Price saw his jaw tighten. The wind shifted, carrying snatches of conversation, sold at Sotheby's for double its estimate. Always difficult to insure pieces of that value. Imagine carrying something like that about on holiday. The last came from a thin man near Price, nodding toward Beatrice's diamond. His companion murmured agreement. Even the idle chatter of strangers circled back to the jewel. Price didn't care for the way people looked at it. Hungry, covetous, calculating. A diamond that valuable was not simply admired. It was considered, as if everyone were silently measuring how close they could get. Clara appeared at his elbow, as if conjured. "Do you always stand this still?" she asked. "It saves energy. You look like a man waiting for a crime." "Just enjoying the view," Price said. She sipped her punch. "Do you think she knows how much people want that diamond?" Yes. Then why wear it? If I had something everyone wanted, I'd bury it under the floorboards. Some people wear their armor in plain sight, Price said. Clara tapped her notebook. That's good. I might steal that line. Consider it public property. She smiled, then glanced back at Beatrice and Morrow. If anything does happen, you'll let me know, won't you? I want to see how a real detective unravels things. Nothing is going to happen, Price said. She said, stories always start that way, and drifted off again, humming to herself. Price watched her go, then looked back at Beatrice. Morrow had moved a little closer, speaking low. Beatrice listened, her expression unreadable. At 9, the fireworks began. Rockets flared from the lower rocks, bursting in sprays of gold and silver over the sea. The terrace applauded. Price stayed back, watching faces instead of fireworks. Beatrice stood near the rail, her diamond flashing with every turn of her head. Morrow was beside her, champagne glass raised. Clara had wedged herself between two potted palms, scribbling even as she gasped at the explosions. Marsh remained alone at his post by a pillar, his expression dark and distant, as though he saw something other than color in the sky. The show ended with a crackling cascade of white stars. Smoke curled upward. The crowd cheered, then slowly drifted back toward the ballroom as the band resumed. Beatrice lingered a moment longer at the rail, gazing down at the sea. Morrow said something that made her glance sharply at him. For an instant, her composed face showed something colder. Then it was gone. She turned and walked back inside. Price's instincts pricked faintly, though he couldn't have said why. It might have been nothing more than weariness from years of chasing trouble. Years that had taught him it never stayed buried for long. By 11, the gala was thinning. Guests scattered to rooms or nightcaps. Price stepped into the quieter lounge just off the terrace. The air was cooler here, the music distant. He found Clara perched on a sofa, still writing, and Marsh looming near the fireplace, nursing a final drink. Marsh's eyes were glassy but hard. Foolishness, he muttered, not to anyone in particular. Waving that thing about. Might as well paint a target on your back. Price didn't respond. Marsh noticed him anyway. You're watching, Marsh said. I know the type. Policeman on holiday. Holidaymaker, Price said evenly. Marsh snorted. We'll see. He drained his glass and stomped off toward the stairs. A moment later, Morrow passed through, humming, a satisfied curve to his mouth. Beatrice was nowhere to be seen, perhaps already in her suit with the diamond locked away. Price left shortly after. As he climbed the stairs to his room, he passed the manager, Dalrymple, who was locking the side storeroom. Successful evening, Price said. Dalrymple exhaled in relief. Nothing broken, no scandals, no complaints. That counts as success. Let's hope it stays that way, Price said. Dalrymple nodded fervently. Indeed. Price reached his suite and loosened his tie. From the balcony, he could see the bay dark and still now, the last wisps of fireworks smoke drifting over the water. The terrace below was nearly empty. He should have been thinking of nothing. Just the sound of the waves, the cool air. Instead, his mind kept circling back to that diamond and the sharp flicker in Beatrice's eyes when Morrow had spoken to her. Trouble, he thought, had a way of starting as the faintest ripple. Chapter 3, The Vanished Diamond. A sharp knock woke Inspector Harold Price just after 7. He sat up, instantly alert. Old habits, he thought grimly. Holidays weren't meant to start this way. The knock came again, brisker this time. Price opened the door to find Dalrymple, the hotel manager, pale and sweating in his immaculate suit. Mr. Price, Dalrymple said in a low, strained voice, I beg your pardon for disturbing you, but there's been, well, an incident. Show me, Price said. Dalrymple led him 2 doors down the corridor to Lady Beatrice Hargreaves' suite. The door stood ajar. Inside, the elegant sitting room was in disarray, a jewelry case open on the writing desk, silk scarves strewn on the carpet, drawers half pulled out as if someone had searched in panic. Lady Beatrice stood near the window, still in her dressing gown, her expression composed but tight. Behind her, a maid hovered, wringing her hands. "The diamond," Beatrice said when Price entered. "It's gone." "How long have you known it was missing?" Price asked. 10 minutes, she replied. "I removed it after the gala and placed it in my jewelry case. When I opened the case just now, it was gone." Price walked to the desk. The case lay open and empty, its velvet lining unmarked. He ran a finger lightly along the latch. No signs of damage. He checked the lock on the suite door. No scratches or splinters. The key sat on the desk. "Did you lock the door when you went to bed?" "Of course," she said. "I always do." Windows closed and latched. Price examined them. They were secure, high above the cliff path. Opening them from outside would have been acrobatics bordering on suicide. "Who has keys to this suite?" he asked Dalrymple. "Only Lady Beatrice, the maid, and the night porter," Dalrymple said quickly. "And myself." Price nodded once. "Anyone seen entering?" "Not that we know. No disturbances reported during the night." Beatrice folded her arms. Her voice was calm, but her jaw was rigid. "Mr. Price, I was informed you were with Scotland Yard. I will not tolerate gossip or scandal. I want this handled discreetly." "I understand," Price said. He glanced at the maid. "When did you last see the diamond?" "Last night, sir," she said nervously. "Lady Beatrice took it off here in this room before bed. I saw her place it in the case." Price looked around once more. Nothing broken. No signs of forced entry. Yet something worth a small fortune had simply vanished overnight. He asked Dalrymple to discreetly summon the local constable while he made a preliminary check. He walked the corridor. It was quiet, carpet muffling every step. The other suite's doors were closed. Through an open service door, he saw the housekeeping cart still fully stocked. No one had yet begun rounds. He noted the layout. Beatrice's suite sat between Clara Whitfield's on one side and Lucien Marot's on the other. Across the corridor at the corner was Edwin Marsh's. Back inside, Price examined the lock on Beatrice's jewelry case. It was small but well made, no scratches. Either the thief had picked it with surgical care or had used the original key. "Where is the key to the case?" he asked. Beatrice's lips tightened. "In the top drawer of my dressing table." Price opened it. Empty. By the time he finished, Dalrymple had returned with Constable Reeves, a young, broad-shouldered man who looked both eager and out of his depth. "Lady Beatrice," Reeves said with a nervous bow. "We'll get to the bottom of it." Price explained the facts succinctly. Reeves took notes, frowning harder with each detail. "No sign of forced entry," Reeves muttered. "Inside job, maybe?" "Possibly," Price said. "We'll need to speak to the guests nearest this suite." Dalrymple hesitated. "Must we involve them?" Word spreads quickly. "Something has already spread," Price said flatly. "A thief." That silenced him. Price asked to see the night porter. A thin man named Jennings arrived, rubbing his eyes. "Did you see anyone near this corridor last night?" Price asked. "No, sir," Jennings said. "Quiet night. I sat in the lobby from midnight until 5. Heard nothing. Keys. Who could access this suite?" "Only the master key," Jennings said. "Kept in the manager's safe." Dalrymple stiffened. "Which has not been touched." Price filed that away but said nothing. Instead, he sent Jennings to check if any staff had left the building during the night. None had. They began next door at Lucy and Marrow's suite. Marrow answered in a silk robe, perfectly groomed despite the hour. "Ah, Mr. Price," he said lightly. "You come bearing serious eyebrows. Something amiss." "Lady Beatrice's diamond has gone missing," Price said. Marrow lifted his brows in practiced surprise. "A jewel stolen? Possibly. Did you hear or see anything unusual last night?" "Nothing," Marrow said, spreading his hands. "After the gala, I retired early. I slept deeply. Too much champagne, perhaps." He smiled faintly. "I assure you, I prefer to acquire treasures at auction, not by burglary." Price's eyes flicked to a leather travel case on the table, snapped shut. He let it be for now. They crossed to Clara Whitfield's door. She answered in a dressing gown with her hair, a tangled halo, and ink on her fingers. "What's happened?" she asked, blinking. "A theft," Price said. "Lady Beatrice's diamond." Clara's eyes widened. "You're joking." "Unfortunately not." "Did you notice anything unusual overnight?" "I was up late writing," she said, frowning. "Till about 2. Heard Marsh snoring through the wall, if that counts. Otherwise nothing." "Did you leave your room?" "No, I barely left my chair." Price nodded. Clara's surprise seemed genuine, though surprise was easy to fake. Lastly, they went to Marsh's suite. He opened the door, looking rumpled and sour. "What now?" Marsh demanded. "Lady Beatrice's diamond is missing," Price said. Marsh snorted. "Bound to happen, flaunting it like that." "Where were you after the gala?" "In my room. Slept like a stone. Try proving otherwise." He shut the door before they could ask more. Constable Reeves turned to Price in the corridor. "What do you make of it?" "4 people near the scene," Price said. "No forced entry. Someone either had a key or never needed one." "You think it's an inside job?" "I think," Price said. "Someone wanted us to believe it was impossible." Reeves looked lost. "What do we do?" "Search first," Price said quietly. "Guest's luggage, the hotel grounds. We'll need to check the staff quarters as well." Dalrymple flinched. "Discreetly, please." Price gave him a cool look. "Discretion won't recover your guest's diamond. Thoroughness might." By midday, the search was underway. Jennings discreetly checked staff rooms. Reeves and Price walked the garden paths below the terrace, scanning hedges and benches on the off chance the thief had stashed the diamond to collect later. They found nothing. Back inside, Price requested access to the luggage of the 4 neighbors. Dalrymple balked, but Beatrice, now dressed calm but cold, overrode him. "Search everyone," she said. "I don't care how offended they are." Marrow allowed his cases to be opened with a theatrical sigh. Neatly folded suits, silk ties, a small locked box of documents. Nothing suspicious. Clara's luggage was chaos clothes tangled with notebooks, loose papers everywhere, crumbs from hastily eaten biscuits. No diamond. Marsh refused flatly. "No one rummages through my things." Dalrymple tried to soothe him. Marsh remained immovable. Price didn't press for now. Pushing him too soon would gain nothing. By early afternoon, they regrouped in Dalrymple's office. No diamond, no sign of forced entry, no clear suspect. Price stood at the window, thinking. Something was wrong about the scene. Not what was present, but what wasn't. "Dalrymple," he said suddenly. "Who entered Lady Beatrice's suite to clean this morning?" "No one," Dalrymple said. "Housekeeping hadn't started yet. Her maid raised the alarm first." "Then why," Price said, "were the scarves on the carpet folded?" Dalrymple blinked. "I don't know. Because whoever searched the jewelry case was careful," Price said. "Almost too careful. They disturbed nothing they didn't have to. They wanted it to look untouched until she checked." Reeves frowned. "So they knew her habits." "Exactly. Price said quietly. They knew she'd look there first. He thought of the thin platinum chain around her neck the night before. The way Marrow's gaze had followed it, the flicker in her eyes at something he'd said. Someone planned this, Price murmured, and they planned it from very close by. He turned from the window. We keep it quiet for now, he told Dalrymple. Tell the other guests only that a valuable item is misplaced. No talk of theft. And us? Reeves asked. We watch, Price said. The thief can't sell the diamond here. They have to move it or hide it long enough to leave with it. Either way, they'll make a mistake. And if they don't, they will, Price said, because they think they've won. Before returning to his suite, he stopped once more at Lady Beatrice's room. She stood at the window, looking out at the sea. Any news? She asked. Not yet, Price said, but I will find it. She turned her head slightly, the faintest trace of a smile, or something like it. I chose to bring it, you know. Everyone told me not to. Why did you? She looked back out the window. Because people behave differently around treasure. I like seeing what they become. Price studied her for a moment. And what do you think they've become? Her eyes flicked toward the door, the corridor beyond. Hungry, she said softly. Price left her then, the word echoing in his mind. Hungry. Yes, that fit. Chapter 4's. Suspects and secrets. By the next morning, the tension in the Seacliffe Grand was palpable. The theft had been kept quiet from most guests, but rumors were slipping through like water through cracks. Heads turned when Lady Beatrice walked past, though she carried herself as calmly as ever, if anything, more aloof. Inspector Harold Price had spent the early hours in quiet observation. He took his tea on the terrace and simply watched. He wanted to see how people moved before they remembered they were being watched. Lucine Morrow appeared, dressed impeccably in pale linen, offering a relaxed smile to anyone who looked his way. Clara Whitfield rushed in late to breakfast, hair untidy, clutching her notebook. Edwin Marsh arrived last, silent and scowling, and bolted down his eggs as though punishing them. Beatrice did not appear at all. Price noted each detail, then rose. It was time to press harder. He no longer cared about bruising pride. A diamond was missing, and the list of people who could have taken it was short. Price found Morrow in the lounge, leafing through a French newspaper. The man looked up with a faint, lazy smile. "Ah, Mr. Price," he said. "Have they found Lady Beatrice's treasure?" "Not yet," Price replied. "I'd like a word, but of course." They sat near the window. Price dispensed with pleasantries. "Where were you after the gala?" "I returned to my suite just before midnight," Morrow said. "I wrote a few letters, then slept. Any witnesses to that?" "Only my pen," Morrow said smoothly. Price leaned forward. "You were standing beside her for half the evening, admiring the diamond." "Admiring beauty is not a crime," Morrow said lightly. "Stealing it would be. And I assure you, I do not steal what I can purchase." "You're an art dealer," Price said. "You know how easily such things disappear." "Too easily," Morrow agreed. "That is why I avoid jewelry. It tempts the wrong sort of man." "You were seen receiving a crate on the terrace," Price said. "What was in it?" "Lithographs," Morrow said without hesitation. "For private sale to a client. They are locked in the manager's storeroom." "I want to see them." "Gladly," Morrow said. "You may even like them. Parisian, very modern. Everyone appears to be falling apart." He met Price's eyes steadily, his smile faint but unwavering. Smooth, Price thought. Too smooth. But being smooth did not make him guilty. "Do not mistake charm for innocence," Morrow said suddenly, as if reading his mind. "It is only a habit." Price rose. So is lying. Mauro gave a small, amused bow. Touché. Price found Clara on the terrace, hammering at her typewriter between cups of tea. She stopped when he approached, pushing her hair from her face. "I suppose you want to ask if I stole it," she said. "I do," Price said simply. "Well, I didn't," she said, "but I understand why someone might." "Do you?" he asked. Clara leaned back, folding her arms. Imagine being her. Everyone watches when you walk into a room. Not because they like you, because you have something they want. That can't feel safe. "You notice people watching her," Price said. "Everyone noticed," Clara said, "even if they pretended they didn't." It was like a bonfire in the middle of the terrace. "Where were you after the gala?" "In my room, writing until about 2. "Did you hear anything in the corridor?" "Just Marsh snoring like a freight train through the wall," she said, "and one soft thump. Maybe a door closing around one, but it could have been anything." "You didn't leave your room?" "No, I did not." She paused. "And if I had, I would have tripped over my own typewriter cable." Price almost smiled. "You write crime novels. How would you steal it?" "Easy," Clara said promptly. "Follow her upstairs. Wait until she sleeps. Pick the lock on the case. Take the stone. Leave nothing else disturbed. And don't try to sell it now. Hide it, walk away with it in your luggage, and fence it in London later." "That sounds very practiced," Price said. "I said I write about crime," Clara said. "I didn't say I commit it." Next, Price sought out the banker. Edwin Marsh was in the billiard room, cracking balls across the green baize. He glowered when Price walked in. "Here to accuse me," Marsh said. "To ask questions," Price replied. "I told you," Marsh snapped. "I went to bed after the gala." "Did anyone see you?" "I don't require witnesses to sleep." Price studied him. "You argued with Lady Beatrice during dinner the night before last." "About investments." Marsh's eyes narrowed. "Where'd you hear that?" "You were not whispering," Price said. "She dabbles," Marsh said with disdain. "Treats the market like a parlor game." "I told her she'd lose her shirt. She told me to mind my own affairs, which I did." "Do you know how much that diamond is worth?" Price asked. "Too much," Marsh said flatly. "And if you think I stole it, you're wasting your time. I don't steal things. I buy them. I can afford to. Thieves can afford things too," Price said. "They just prefer not to pay." Marsh slammed the cue down so hard the balls jumped. "I don't care about trinkets," he said. "And if you have any sense, you'll leave me out of it." He stalked from the room, leaving the balls rolling in silence. Price watched him go, frowning. Anger could be bluster, or it could be fear in disguise. Lady Beatrice received Price in her suit, now immaculate again. "Your suspects are surely getting irritated," she said mildly. "That's often when people reveal themselves," Price said. "May I ask, why bring the diamond here at all?" "Because people behave differently around treasure," she said. "It strips away their masks." "Do you enjoy that?" "I like knowing who I'm speaking to," Beatrice said. "And now I do." Price studied her face. "Do you think it was one of them?" "I think," she said, "that everyone wants something. Some of them wanted money. Some wanted me to notice them. One of them wanted both. She didn't say which." Price didn't ask. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't helping either. Price spent the afternoon quietly probing their timelines. Lucien Morrow claimed he retired just after midnight. No staff saw him after the gala. His door had been locked from inside when the maid came with his breakfast tray, but that meant little. He could have returned before dawn. Clara Whitfield was the only one who admitted being awake. She had indeed ordered tea from the night porter at 1, which lent weight to her story. Yet that gave her more opportunity than the others, not less. Edwin Marsh had been heard snoring by Clara, which oddly worked as a partial alibi. But snores could be faked or timed, and Marsh's temper might make him careless, but not honest. Beatrice herself had the strongest motive to stage a theft. Insurance fraud was not unheard of, yet her calm felt more like anger tightly caged than relief at a scheme succeeding, and she had not reported the theft publicly, which ran counter to fraud. Each alibi was thin as paper. Price needed cracks. Late in the day, he passed the storeroom near the second-floor landing. Dalrymple was locking it. Inside, Price glimpsed Marrow's crate. "I'll inspect those items now," he said. Dalrymple hesitated, then produced the key. Inside were several framed lithographs wrapped in tissue. Price checked them quickly: modernist city scenes, sharp angles, muted colors. No hidden diamond, no false panels in the crate. Where was this crate between yesterday morning and last night? Price asked. "In the luggage room, locked," Dalrymple said. "Who had the key?" "Myself and the night porter." Price left, thoughtful. The crate had seemed an obvious hiding place, perhaps too obvious. Morrow was clever enough to know that. As twilight fell, Price walked the garden path behind the hotel, turning over what he knew: no forced entry, no witnesses, 4 possible suspects, all with reasons to want money or attention. Clara needed funds to publish her next book. Morrow's reputation in Paris had been dented by rumors of debt. Marsh had investments turning sour. Beatrice herself had been withdrawing from society. With whispers, she was nearly bankrupt. Price stopped at the cliff's edge, looking out over the darkening bay. The wind off the water cut through his thoughts. Chapter 50, Death at Dawn. The scream shattered the morning calm. Price had been halfway through his first cup of tea when it came. A sharp, tearing sound from somewhere below the cliffside terrace. Chairs scrape. A maid dropped a tray. Price was already on his feet, moving. He crossed the terrace at a run. Guests were emerging from doorways, bewildered and frightened. Dalrymple stood frozen at the balustrade, his face drained of color. "It came from the beach," he stammered. "Below the south stairs." Price didn't answer. He vaulted the steps 2 at a time, following the zigzagging wooden staircase down the cliff face to the sand. Halfway down, the scene came into view. The tide was low, the sand hard and dark. A woman in a chambermaid's apron stood sobbing, hands clamped to her mouth. Beside her, sprawled on the wet sand at the waterline, lay a man. Even from 20 yards away, Price knew who it was. Edwin Marsh. His jacket was twisted half off one shoulder, his shirt soaked with seawater. His walking stick lay a few feet away. His skull, Price saw as he knelt, was caved in just behind the right ear. The hair there matted with blood. The tide had lapped at him, smearing the edges of the wound, but not enough to hide it. Dalrymple stumbled down the last steps behind him. "Good Lord," he whispered. Price rose slowly. "Send for Constable Reeves," he said. "And keep everyone away from this beach." Dalrymple nodded and fled up the steps. Price turned his eyes back to the sand. Marsh's body had left a long drag mark from the waterline. The incoming tide had just begun to creep over it. Closer to the cliffs, faint footprints dotted the sand, blurred but not erased. At least 2 sets, one much heavier than the other. They led from the hotel gardens to the water's edge. Price crouched. The footprints crossed and overlapped, suggesting a struggle. There were no other marks. No sign Marsh had fallen from the stairs or the cliff. He had come down here alive, and someone had killed him. Reeves arrived 15 minutes later, red-faced and panting. Price briefed him in clipped sentences. "No one goes down these stairs," Price finished. "We treat this as murder." Reeves nodded, eyes wide. Understood. Move the body after the doctor examines it, Price said. Until then, cover him from the tide. Reeves gestured to two men from the village who had followed him. They erected a makeshift canvas windbreak around the corpse. Price climbed back toward the hotel. Guests clustered in uneasy knots around the terrace. Murmurs followed Price as he crossed. Lady Beatrice stood apart at the balustrade, as composed as ever, though her knuckles were white on the rail. Clara sat pale and motionless at her table, her typewriter forgotten. Lucien Morrow leaned on a doorway, his face grave, his eyes unreadable. Dalrymple hurried over. How did this happen? Hay was struck from behind, Price said. Odd on the beach. Good heavens. Where was everyone between sunrise and now? Dalrymple swallowed. Breakfast begins at 7. Most guests were still in their rooms. Price nodded. Keep them there until I've spoken to each. He went first to Clara. She looked up at him with wide, stunned eyes. Marsh is dead, he said quietly. I heard, she whispered. Someone said he was on the beach. Did you see him this morning? No, she said. I hadn't even dressed. I was about to come down for coffee when the scream came. You didn't hear anything in the night? Clara shook her head. Nothing. Just the wind. Her shock seemed genuine, but shock could be faked. Price knew that too well. Lucien Morrow was the opposite of shocked. When Price told him, he simply exhaled and folded his arms. Mon Dieu, he said softly. How dreadful, but not surprising. Not surprising, Price repeated. Marsh was, how do you say, a man who provokes. That doesn't usually lead to murder. Perhaps not for most, Morrow said, but he was full of anger. Some people invite their own disasters. Where were you this morning? In my suite asleep, Morrow said. I rose at 7. Jennings the porter brought my tray. Price filed that away. Morrow was a bit too calm, but then some men always were. Beatrice received the news with a slow nod, as though confirming something she had already suspected. Did you see him last night? Price asked. No. After dinner I retired. You argued with him the previous evening. A disagreement over investments, she said. Not worth murder. Where were you this morning? In my room, writing letters. She met his gaze steadily. No grief, no surprise, just control. It was difficult to tell whether that meant innocence or a lifetime of never letting the world see her flinch. Price decided to visit the scene again. Back on the beach, the doctor had arrived. A brisk man from the village, coat flapping in the breeze. He straightened from the body as Price approached. Blow to the head, he said. Blunt instrument heavy. He died almost instantly. No water in the lungs. He was dead before the tide reached him. Time of death. Between 5 and 6 this morning, the doctor said. Closer to 5 if I had to guess. Thank you, Price said. He walked the beach once more. The tide had blurred the drag marks further but not erased them. Marsh had been attacked inland and dragged to the water. His walking stick lay nearby. Price examined it. It was undamaged, which meant Marsh hadn't used it to defend himself. Footprints led to and from the scene, already softening under the new tide. Price could make out 2 sets Marsh's heavy, deep ones, and another pair, lighter, narrower, overlapping his near the water's edge. They returned toward the stairs. So Marsh had come here with someone who had left alive. Price returned to the hotel and called Dalrymple and Reeves to the manager's office. He needed the morning movements laid out clearly. Jennings, Dalrymple said, consulting the staff log, saw Mr. Morrow at 7:30 when he delivered his tray. He saw Miss Whitfield at 7:40, fully dressed and coming down to the terrace. He saw Lady Beatrice's maid at 750 carrying letters to the post. "And Marsh?" Price asked. "No one saw him at all this morning," Dalrymple said. "His room was empty when the maid knocked at 8. Price tapped the desk. "So between 5 and 6, he left his room, went down to the beach with someone, and was killed. That someone returned unseen before 7. Could it be connected to the diamond theft?" Reeves asked.
"Yes,"
Price said. "Or someone used the theft as cover." "Cover for what?" Dalrymple asked. "Murder," Price said. Price and Reeves searched Marsh's suite. The bed was rumpled but cold. His valise stood half-packed on the table, shirts folded with military precision. A sheath of papers lay in a leather folder, stock charts, bank reports, and 2 terse letters from business associates warning of exposure and overreach. "Financial trouble," Price murmured. Inside the wardrobe, he found a small safe built into the floor. It was locked. Dalrymple fetched the master key. Inside were bundles of banknotes and a folder marked "Private." The folder contained a typed draft of a proposal for a shipping merger, annotated heavily in Marsh's hand, and bearing Lady Beatrice Hargreaves' name on the first page. Price raised an eyebrow. Beatrice had denied ongoing business dealings with Marsh. Either she had lied, or Marsh had involved her without permission. "Keep this between us," Price told Reeves. "For now." He returned to Beatrice's suite and laid the document on her table. She regarded it coolly. "Marsh had this in his safe," Price said. "You said you had no dealings with him." "I had none," Beatrice said flatly. "He pestered me about joining his scheme. I refused, loudly, emphatically," she said. "He didn't take rejection well. Did you meet with him privately?" "No," she said. "And if I had, he would not be so foolish as to die on a beach and leave me implicated." Clara was on the terrace, pale and jittery, staring at the sea. "Marsh is dead," she said as he approached. "I can't make it make sense. He was solid, like furniture." "Furniture can be broken," Price said. "Did you see him last night after the gala?" "No, I went straight to bed." She hesitated. "All right, I tried to. I was writing. I kept thinking I heard someone on the stairs around 2. Just faint footsteps. I assumed it was staff. Could it have been Marsh? Maybe? I didn't check." She bit her lip. "You think this connects to the diamond?" "I think," Price said, "that when one person steals and another dies, they're rarely strangers." By late afternoon, Price had a clearer shape of the puzzle. Marsh had been in financial trouble and pushing Beatrice to join his risky merger. She had refused. Hours later, her diamond vanished. The next morning, Marsh ended up dead on the sand. Someone had lured him out before dawn. Someone he trusted enough to follow. He'd been struck from behind, dragged to the waterline, and left for the tide to claim. But the killer had misjudged. The tide had been too slow, and the body had been found, and somewhere among the remaining 3, Beatrice, Morrow, or Clara, one of them knew far more than they admitted. As dusk fell over the bay, Price stood on the terrace alone. The sea was turning black again, the wind rising. He had come to Seacliff Bay to rest. Instead, he was now hunting a jewel thief and a killer who might be the same person, or 2 people working side by side. Either way, they were here. They were watching him, and they believed they were clever enough to get away with it. Chapter 6c. The trap is set. By dawn the next day, the mood at the Seacliffe Grand had shifted from unease to fear. Marsh's death had ended all pretense of a discreet investigation. Guests now whispered in hallways, eyes darting, voices dropping to nothing when Price passed. Constable Reeves had stationed a man at the cliff stairs and sealed Marsh's suite. Marsh's body had been taken to the village morgue. and the diamond was still missing. Price stood on the terrace, sipping black coffee and watching the bay. At 9, Price summoned the 3 remaining suspects, Beatrice, Morrow, and Clara, to the lounge. Dalrymple stood pale in the corner, wringing his hands. Price remained standing. Let us be clear. A valuable diamond has been stolen. A man is dead. No one leaves this hotel until I find answers. Beatrice raised an eyebrow. Are we suspects? Yes, Price said simply. All of you. Clara swallowed. Morrow only smiled faintly. Price turned to Beatrice. You argued with Marsh the night before your diamond vanished. A disagreement, she said coolly. Over investments. Marsh was in financial trouble, Price said. If he could not have your money, your diamond would do. Her lips thinned. You believe he stole it? I think it's possible, Price said, but someone killed him before he could spend it. Clara flinched. Morrow's eyes gleamed amused. Perhaps, he said lightly. Someone feared he might talk. Perhaps, Price said. But whoever killed Marsh did not take the diamond, because it still hasn't appeared. That made them all look at him. Whoever stole it, Price said softly, still has it. He sent them away one by one, asking each to return separately for a private interview. Clara came first, pale and jittery. Why did you come to Seacliff Bay? Price asked. To write, she said quickly. To get away from London. I was supposed to finish my manuscript. You're behind on deadlines. She blinked. How do you know that? Your publisher wired the hotel yesterday asking for you, Price said. The desk clerk mentioned it. Clara flushed. Yes, I need the advance to survive, but I wouldn't kill someone for it. Did Marsh approach you? She shook her head. No, he barely spoke to me. He only glared when my typewriter was too loud. Did you see him on the beach? No, she whispered. I heard the scream, same as everyone. Would you recognize the diamond if you saw it again? Yes, Clara said faintly. You could see it in your sleep. Price let her go. She fled the room as if it were closing in on her. Lucien Morrow entered with effortless poise, hands in his pockets. You are very calm, Price said. Worry never improves matters. Morrow said, Where were you at dawn? In bed, Morrow said smoothly. Ask Jennings. He brought my tray at 7:30. Between 5 and 7, Price said. You could have walked to the beach, killed Marsh, returned, and staged sleep. I could have, Morrow agreed. But why would I? Marsh was dull. I kill only boredom. You admired the diamond. I admire many things, Morrow said. That does not mean I steal them. Your debts in Paris suggest otherwise, Price said. Morrow's eyes flashed, then cooled. Rumors. My affairs are my own. You brought a locked crate to this hotel, Price said. You could have hidden it inside. I could have, Morrow said again. But you checked. You found nothing. Price studied him. You enjoy the game? Of course, Morrow said. But I prefer winning it legally. Lady Beatrice arrived last, precise as always, wearing navy silk and a faint perfume like cold roses. Marsh had documents naming you as a partner in his proposed merger, Price said. I told him no, she said. You refused emphatically. Yes, and after you refused, he ended up dead. That is not cause and effect, Beatrice said. It is coincidence. You brought that diamond knowing people would covet it. Correct. And now it's gone. She met his gaze without blinking. And you wonder if I staged the theft myself for insurance? Yes, Price said. Then ask yourself this, she said quietly. Why would I risk my name for money I do not need? It was true, at least on the surface. Beatrice's wealth was legendary, but legends often hid cracks. Still, her composure was unbroken, as if her emotions were locked away with the same precision as her jewelry. "You want to know who stole it?" Price said. "I want to know who thought they could steal from me," she replied. After they were gone, Price paced the lounge, thinking aloud to Reeves. Marsh was killed between 5 and 6. Price said, struck from behind, dragged to the tide line. Who would lure him down there? Reeves asked. Someone he trusted, or someone who offered him something he wanted. Price said, money, a deal, a way out. The diamond, possibly. If Marsh took it and was planning to sell it, someone might have followed him to steal it from him or silence him. But we haven't found it, Reeves said. Which means it never reached the beach, Price said. Or the killer has hidden it where no one's looked. He stopped pacing. Reeves, have you searched the rooms again since yesterday? No, sir. Then tonight, Price said. We will, but not quietly. That evening, Price called all 3 suspects to the terrace just after dinner. The bay was dark and still. Lanterns glowed along the balustrade. He stood before them. This ends now, he said. Tonight we search every room, every trunk, every case. Publicly. Dalrymple twitched. Publicly.
Yes,
Price said. Because the thief won't let us. They'll panic first. Beatrice's brows lifted faintly. Morrow's smile didn't waver, but his eyes sharpened. Clara paled. Price let silence hang. We begin at 9. Then he walked away, leaving them to stew. From the lounge doorway, Price watched them as they dispersed. Clara fled almost immediately, clutching her notebook like a shield. Morrow lingered by the balustrade, finishing his wine with exaggerated leisure, though his jaw was set tighter than usual. When he finally left, it was too quickly for true nonchalance. Beatrice remained seated for several minutes, gazing out at the water as if trying to decide something. Then she rose and walked calmly inside. They were all cracking just a little, exactly as he wanted. A small break. At 8, Jennings the porter came to find Price. Sir, he said, you asked to be told if anything odd turned up. Yes. One of the chambermaids found something behind the radiator in the south corridor, Jennings said, wrapped in cloth. Show me, Price said. They went to the narrow side corridor near the south stairwell. Jennings handed him a small bundle wrapped in an old cleaning rag. Inside was a length of fine platinum chain, snapped cleanly halfway. Price held it up. The break was sharp recent. He remembered the way Beatrice's diamond had hung on such a chain. Where exactly was this? Tucked behind the radiator pipes, Jennings said. Dusty there. Someone had to have known to hide something there. Price's eyes narrowed. The south corridor led both to the stairs down to the beach and to the guest suites. Whoever had killed Marsh could have passed through there and dropped this while hiding the diamond. Say nothing, Price told Jennings. To anyone. At 9 sharp, Price gathered everyone again in the lounge. We begin the search, he said. Clara sat taut as a bowstring. Morrow lounged, but too casually. Beatrice stood perfectly still. Price nodded to Reeves. Start with Miss Whiffield's room. Clara flared. I didn't take it. Then you have nothing to fear, Price said. They found nothing in Clara's luggage but a chaos of papers, ink-stained dresses, and a crushed biscuit. Morrow's room came next. Reeves searched each case, each pocket, each folded shirt. Nothing. Morrow smiled faintly, as if to say, I told you so. Lastly, Beatrice's suit. She watched with cool detachment as Reeves and Jennings opened her trunks. Neatly folded gowns, pearls, a gold compact. No diamond. Price stood by the door, arms folded. He hadn't expected to find it. The point was pressure. The real search would be later, when the guilty one, rattled, tried to move it. As they dispersed, Beatrice paused at the threshold. "You enjoy this," she said quietly. "No," Price said. "I enjoy results." By midnight, the hotel had gone still. Guests locked their doors. Staff whispered. Reeves patrolled the corridors with soft steps. Price sat in the darkened lounge waiting. At 12, he heard it. Faint footsteps on the second-floor landing. He rose silently and followed. The figure moved toward the south corridor, the one leading to the beach stairs. They carried something small and wrapped in cloth. Price stepped into the light. "Going somewhere," he said. The figure froze. Chapter 70. The Seaside Confession. The figure froze in the half-light of the south corridor, clutching the small cloth bundle. Inspector Harold Price stepped closer. "Put it on the floor," he said quietly. Clara Whitfield slowly obeyed. Her face was pale, eyes wide and shimmering. She sank down against the wall, trembling. Price knelt and opened the cloth. Inside lay Lady Beatrice's diamond, glittering even in the dim gaslight. The platinum chain was broken, the clasp twisted. Price let the cloth fall shut again. "Start talking." Her voice came ragged, tumbling. "I didn't steal it," she whispered. "I found it." "Where?" "Behind the radiator in this corridor. Tonight, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marsh, about the way you said the thief would panic. I thought maybe if I helped, you'd stop looking at me like I'd done it. So you came here," Price said. "At midnight." "Alone?" "Yes," she said. "I was going to bring it to you right after. I swear it. I wasn't going to keep it." Price believed her. Fear clung to her like salt, but not guilt. "Did you tell anyone?" he asked. "No, I did not." He exhaled slowly. "All right." He picked up the diamond bundle. "Go back to your room. Lock the door. Say nothing." Clara hesitated. "You believe me?" "I'll decide that later," Price said. "But you're not the one who killed Marsh." She fled down the corridor, still shaking. Price turned the cold weight of the diamond over in his hand. The thief had hidden it here, and then gone back for it. But Marsh had died first. Price stood alone in the corridor, the sea wind whispering through the old pipes, and let the pieces settle. The diamond had vanished from Beatrice's locked suite. Only 4 people had the opportunity: Beatrice, Clara, Morrow, Marsh. Marsh had died on the beach at dawn, struck from behind. He'd gone down there willingly with someone he trusted or feared. Someone had wanted Marsh silent. Marsh had been desperate. Price had found letters about failing investments. He had needed a way to recover, and he'd known Beatrice owned something worth a fortune. Price's mind replayed Marsh's behavior the night of the gala. Planted at the edge of the terrace, scowling, watching Beatrice and Morrow. And then the next morning, gone from his room before anyone else stirred. Marsh had stolen the diamond. But Marsh was no thief. He was clumsy, obvious. Someone had known, followed him, and killed him to take it. And only one person could have done that and hidden it so cleanly. Price went to Lucy and Morrow's suite. He didn't knock, just opened the door with Dalrymple's master key. Morrow sat at the writing desk, sleeves rolled, pen in hand. He looked up calmly, as if he'd been expecting him. "Inspector," Morrow said. "You move like a man who has decided something." Price dropped the cloth bundle on the desk. The diamond flashed between them. Morrow regarded it without blinking. "Ah, so it is found. In the south corridor," Price said. "Behind a radiator, right on the path from the stairs to the beach. Interesting." "You followed Marsh at dawn," Price said. "You watched him steal it. Or you helped him, and then killed him to keep it." Morrow's mouth curved slightly. "Proof, footprints," Price said. "2 sets on the sand, 1 heavy. Marsh, 1 lighter. Yours. You were the only one small enough for that corridor window latch, too." the one left slightly askew in Beatrice's suit. Morrow leaned back. "You have been thorough. You waited until she slept," Price went on. "You used your thin dealer's blade to slip the window catch, reached through, and opened it from the inside. You took the diamond, then gave it to Marsh to hide until you could smuggle it out in your art crate. But Marsh grew bold. He wanted to sell it himself. So you lured him down to the beach at dawn." Morrow's eyes glittered. "And if I deny it, I found part of the broken chain jammed under your suitcase wheel." Price said quietly, "You stepped on it while handling the diamond. That finally cracked the mask." Morrow went still. "I had no choice," he said softly. "He would have ruined it. Blundered, drawn the police. And then what? My reputation gone. Years of work gone. So you killed him." "I removed an obstacle," Morrow said. "You murdered a man," Price said. Morrow's smile returned. "Brittle now. History is full of obstacles removed." Price stepped forward and set the diamond down with a hard click. "History is also full of murderers who thought they were clever." Morrow looked at the stone, then at Price. "What will you do?" "Reeves is outside," Price said. "You're going to walk with me." Calmly, quietly, Morrow exhaled, straightened his cuffs, and rose. "Very well." By 2 a.m., Lucien Morrow was in custody. Reeves had stared at him as though unable to reconcile silk charm with blood. But Morrow went quietly, hands folded behind his back. Price locked the diamond in Dalrymple's safe. The manager wept with relief. "I'll wire the yard," Price said. "They'll take over from here." Yes, of course," Dalrymple stammered. Price walked the empty terrace alone after that, the sea wind cool on his face. Greed, Price thought, always left awake. At sunrise, Lady Beatrice found him still on the terrace. She was wrapped in a dark coat, her hair unbound. "So," she said. "It was Morrow." "Yes." She studied the horizon. "And Marsh." "Stole it," Price said. "Morrow killed him to keep it." Beatrice's eyes were unreadable. "I misjudged Marsh. I thought he lacked the imagination. He had desperation instead," Price said. She nodded once. "And what will become of the diamond?" "It will be returned to you," Price said. "After the yard clears it as evidence." Beatrice's mouth twitched. "Pity. I was almost growing fond of being ordinary again." She turned and left, her footsteps fading along the terrace. Clara appeared a few minutes later, clutching her notebook. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "I wrote 3 different endings," she said. "In all of them, I was the killer. Stick to fiction," Price said gently. She managed a small smile. "It's safer." By midday, Scotland Yard detectives arrived to collect Morrow and the diamond. Guests began cautiously drifting back to the lounges. Dalrymple had the terrace scrubbed until it gleamed. Price stood at the cliff rail, watching gulls wheel above the sea. The wind smelled of salt again, clean and sharp, as if the bay had decided to forget. He would leave tomorrow. He had come here for rest and found only death and deceit. But at least it was finished. Behind him, Clara's typewriter clattered faintly from the terrace tables. He smiled just slightly. She would have her ending now. Price turned from the sea and went inside.